couple of years ago when I was invited to serve as the president-elect of the NEA, I was actually at a crossroads in my economics career. For those of you that know me, for about the past 10 years, I've been primarily working in the private sector. Spent a few years working for the federal government. So my job responsibilities did not include teaching or conducting research. However, I felt that I needed to stay involved. I needed to keep my credibility. And so I was on my free time, conducting independent research, trying to get published in peer-reviewed journals. I was agreeing to referee econ articles for journals, and I was staying engaged in the NEA and attending conferences. However, none of these activities were acknowledged by my employers or rewarded on my end-of-year performance reviews. And so they required substantial volunteer time, leaving me very stressed and overwhelmed. If you've seen me at some of the conferences, a few years ago, I probably looked very, very stressed. I was. And so, and also at the same time, when the economics profession was starting to address some of the hostilities that existed within our profession, I found that voices like mine, those of us economists working outside of academia and the research institutions, were not represented. In fact, there was very little interest in hearing our voices. Part of this had to do with economists and academia and research not fully understanding what we economists do outside of academia, contributing to a lack of respect for what we do. So between the stress and the dismissal I felt, I decided that I would stop trying to be part of a discipline that did not understand my work or value my contributions. So for about 2 years, I stopped working on my outstanding research projects, I started declining referee requests, and I stopped attending conferences. And life was great. Even when I came through DC and talked to me during those 2 years, I've always heard, "You look great." That was great. So when that email from Nina came, damn, I was tempted to decline. I think most of us know what my decision was, right? I'm standing here. And so the reason why I accepted, I felt that this could be an opportunity to bridge the gap between academia and the applied work that I do. My applied work is not done with the aim of getting published in academic journals. Rather, the work that I and many others in my sector do is to promote economic opportunities and growth among people of color, a shared mission of the NEA. And so I prepared my address with particular consideration for the junior economists and the graduate students of color who are still shaping their research agendas and careers. I want to illustrate the applied work you're doing outside of academia, because that work can and should be informed, influenced, and impacted by you, by the research conducted by NEA members and economists of color in particular. Let me first explain the work that I do. I work in the impact investing ecosystem. Just in case you don't really know what impact investing is, hopefully this is going to be a little bit helpful. If not, it's all good. Impact investing is the practice of making investments with the intention to generate positive, measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. Impact investors make equity or debt investments in for-profit companies whose products or services address a social or environmental challenge. In my former work at an impact investing firm, I informed investment decisions by helping the investment team understand the severity of the social challenge, assess whether the potential investment addressed the root cause of the social challenge, and estimated the potential social value the innovation could achieve if the business was successful in taking scale. If the investment was made, I monitored and measured the innovation's impacts over time. I now work for an institute where I support impact investors, companies, public entities, and others measure and communicate their impact. As a development economist, so most of you know, most of my work had been in international development with a focus on economic and social challenges in African countries. I worked at an impact investing organization that invested in innovations aiming to improve the lives of poor people living on less than $5 a day in developing countries. That organization, 2 of the founding board members were Esther Duflo and Michael Craner, just so you can get a sense of the role that development economists have been playing in the impact investing space focused on international development. I was able to leverage economists' research to know whether innovation is claiming to address a social challenge in a developing country we're actually addressing the root cause of the challenge. The research I reference often had practical implications for policy recommendations, in addition to implications for innovation within the private sector. Again, I want to stress that the research I was referencing were research done by economists. However, over the past few years, I've shifted to working on U.S. domestic issues. Racial equity is a major focus for impact investors allocating capital within the U.S. Entrepreneurs have developed innovations in health, education, housing, digital services, and more with the aim of reducing racial, health, and wealth disparities. Impact investors are looking to identify those innovations that can lead to meaningful change and improve racial equity. This brings me to the work NEA members are doing as economists and social scientists. One of the missions of the NEA is to produce and disseminate knowledge on economic issues that are of exceptional interest to promote economic growth among people of color. Although many of us are conducting research on health, education, housing, digital services, and other social issues that disproportionately impact people of color, I have found it difficult to leverage our work in a way that is most useful for the private sector. While we economists have successfully incorporated policy implications into our research articles, we have yet to adequately include the practical implications and applications of our work. Impact investors leverage existing research to help them make investment decisions. Impact investing is a relatively new industry. Despite its nascent status, the impact investing market is estimated to have over $1.5 trillion of assets under management and is growing. We have the opportunity to inform and influence this industry by bridging the gap between current research and practical application. Investments made based on clear, applicable economics research can multiply the positive impacts of initiatives and improve the lives of people of color. So just to give a few examples. Research has shown that for patients of similar insurance status, income, age, and severity of conditions, people of color receive lower quality health care. Additionally, research has shown racial differences in diagnoses, treatment decisions, pain management, and dosing and prescribing of certain drugs. Leveraging this research, innovators are developing solutions, and impact investors are investing in solutions which limit medical professionals from considering race in their medical decisions. Innovations in digital health and remote patient monitoring allow healthcare providers to objectively assess health risks, removing any potential implicit biases the healthcare provider may hold. Another example. Research has shown that people of color are less likely to have formal credit histories used by traditional credit scoring models and have lower credit scores. Fintech companies are developing alternative credit scoring models to extend credit access. Impact investors are investing in fintech companies that have not only demonstrated the ability to be more inclusive in their lending practices, but also adopt responsible lending practices. And then an example from my work in international development when I was at the Impact Investing organization. Research has shown that the adoption of mobile money systems in Africa has contributed to a decrease in poverty and allows for consumption smoothing among poor households. This rich body of research has been conducted by a number of development economists, and the work has been coming out of Kenya and Uganda. And because of that, impact investors have started to invest in mobile money systems and digital financial services companies with the aim of lifting poor people out of poverty because of the existing evidence that have demonstrated the effect on them. So as economists, we can also create value and impact by using our research to mitigate unforeseen negative effects from racial equity. Again, using my current field as an example, impact investors not only consider the positive impacts of the investments they make, but must also consider possible negative impacts. When impact investing is done correctly, investors should ensure the companies they fund protect the data they are using and collecting, lend responsibly to prevent exploitative practices, and consider any potential negative outcomes from the companies they invest in. For example, innovations that may not be directly addressing racial disparities may nevertheless have racial implications, both positive and negative, that need to be considered. So even for private sector solutions that do not target racial equity, we need to understand whether the outcomes vary by race, gender, or other characteristics. I hope this helps to stimulate additional ways our research can be used and have an impact on addressing racial inequities. This is not an attempt to downplay the importance of our work for forming policy. We can do both. In fact, often the most effective solutions require action by both the government and the private sector. For example, the U.S. is facing a housing crisis where there is not enough affordable housing. Research has shown a number of reasons as to why this is the case and how people of color are disproportionately hurt by the lack of affordable housing. The policy implications that come out of this research has emphasized government subsidies for creating, preserving, and operating affordable rental properties and other federal policy levers. A private sector solution often missing from this research is to address the inefficiencies across the construction value chain that could drive down the cost of building affordable housing. This alone could narrow the gap between what these buildings cost to construct or maintain and the rental costs people can afford to pay. Just as the government is working to address the affordable housing crisis, so is the private sector, with early-stage companies developing innovative solutions that drive down construction costs, increase quality, and decrease building time. We, as economists of color, bring unique perspectives and experiences that can further inform the effectiveness of solutions addressing social and environmental challenges. There is a need for NEA members and economists of color in particular to see our work as useful beyond just policy implications in order to fully address racial inequities. The private sector is also seeking guidance on how best to eliminate racial inequities and to close the racial health and wealth gaps. And it is my belief that we have the ability and the opportunity to be more. Thank you.